We must draw the line between those who fight and the scourge of gender-based violence. Those are the words of Amazulu King Misuzulu Zwelithini as he addressed those who gathered at the Kings Mead Stadium today in what has been dubbed the National Men's Day. The day is aimed at bringing men together in efforts to fight gender-based violence. Linda Mnisi is live from Durban, joining us this evening. Linda, very good evening to you. I suppose the people came out in their numbers to really make sure that the message is well heard.
Well, in fact, Paul, that was the expectation today as, the King was expected to give that address to scores of people who would have gathered at the Kings Mead Stadium. But with those four groups that were expected to be met along the way during that march, we saw low numbers, a low number of turnout, a number of people not showing up today to today's event. And we had an opportunity to speak to the organizers at the point where everybody was waiting for the Amazulu King, where we engaged them on what exactly had happened and where the issue was in terms of the numbers. And what they had said to us at the time was that, there wasn't proper communication, particularly from the office of the Premier, and that they had dropped the ball because there was communication, that was made, formal communication that was made with the office of the Premier, but they didn't show up. The low number of people that were there ended up having to wait for the Amazulu King, who arrived and, of course, proceeded to the Kings Mead Stadium, proceeded as planned to the Kings Mead Stadium, where he got there and he gave an address. And as expected, Paul, what is a king without dealing with the issues of, rural women, rural men? And that's one of the things, in fact, that he dealt with, talking about access to resources for people who are mostly in rural areas. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Women and children abuse, which is happening also in our rural areas, as much as it happens in our metros. The areas that are far from sources of relief or police stations, rural citizens are also human beings who need to be protected also.
Well, that's the Amazulu King, Paul, talking about, issues of gender-based violence and how they don't only happen in metros, but also in rural areas where resources don't often reach. If you remember, not so long ago, the Gender-Based Violence Summit that was held on the 1st of November, addressed by the President Cyril Ramaphosa, the second one, in fact, where he spoke at length about how government has not met the promise that he made to gender activists and those interested groups. But the King also going as far as talking about, the involvement of young men, the grooming of men in today's communities so that they better our society. Let's take a listen.
We need to come up with a system whereby our system is grooming young men how to be good husbands, how to be fathers and leaders of this country tomorrow. I pledge that we work together in this process.
All right, so that's the Amazulu King. They're talking about grooming young men to be part of this conversation. That's what they want to do. They dubbed today the National Men's Day, and that really to address the issues that affect women, and particularly because the perpetrators of gender-based violence mostly are said to be men. But also the event was graced by the presence of the executive director, the former executive director of UN Women, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, who spoke also about how in different areas and different countries the problem of GBV really differs. In South Africa, it's one country that has a lot of religious leaders, but also traditional leaders, and the importance of getting those traditional leaders, those religious leaders involved in such conversations is very important, because often traditional practices are used to perpetuate gender-based violence. I mean, if you also think about the number of times we've heard of cases that are coming out of churches, and therefore, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, that is, saying that we need a multi-sectoral approach in making sure that we end the scourge.
Very well, Linda Mnisi. Let's leave it there for now, giving us a breakdown of what transpired today.